Please welcome Mr. Ray Hammond.
Well, good afternoon, and how are you? I am a futurologist. Well, you're very polite. How can anybody have such a ridiculous job title as futurologist? How can you have an ology or a logic of the science about the future? Isn't that a contradiction in terms? An oxymoron, like military intelligence? Or European harmony? Or as a very, very sad man said to me in the bar last night, married life. There are 8 key drivers of the future. And over 30 years, in meetings like this, in university rooms, in books, in broadcasting videos, I have refined and honed these ideas until I can feel fairly certain that these 8 are the key drivers that will shape our century. We have to manage a shift in our energy strategy. We have to move over the next 30 or 40 years from being a fossil fuel-based economy to being a sustainable-driven economy. Sustainable energy from sources that are not scarce, from sources that are constantly renewed. Innovation through human ingenuity is wholly sustainable and an infinite resource. This is where we look to for continuing growth, for continuing year upon year growth. Can we do something that we do in a better way? Can we do it less expensively? Can we do it more efficiently? Can we offer our customers more through innovation? This is healthy and successful economic growth. Every business leader needs to be a futurologist to some extent, because every business decision that matters is about the strategic decisions of the future. Now, maybe you don't have to think as far out as I do, perhaps the next year or 2, but you do have to think about the influences that shape the market outside of your control. We have seen many fine, wonderful businesses destroyed. I can think of Kodak as an example, by new technology that arrived. If you want to try and have a winning strategy for the future, you have to try and learn the language of the future.
I would like for you, Ray Hammond, the futurist, to think that you are a CEO. And with these 7 key drivers in mind, what would be your winning aspiration in the market right now?
To apply technology fast and effectively, to challenge my technical advisors to find language that I, my board, and my shareholders can understand, to develop and test language in a way that allows me. Now, Lily, you touched upon it being a philosophical route to each one, and I'm pleased and flattered that you did so, because I do think it is a matter of business philosophy. If we find a language to tackle the future, it allows us to develop a strategy. That strategy then can be, as it were, a gameplay. For example, one of the things that I'm asked constantly is, how do we as busy executives keep up with the learning? How do we keep up with the technology? What is the antidote to all of the change that's happening? And my answer is lifelong learning. Now, by that, I don't mean formal learning. I don't mean redoing degrees or doing extra degrees. I mean giving every single day or part of every single day over to reading, studying, and researching. Amongst the speakers today, you have the very eminent Jack Welch, and I can remember when he was still in charge, going to speak for his company in Switzerland. It's about 12 or 13 years ago. And I met the chief knowledge officer who was also speaking there. The first question he asked me is, what's on your reading list? And we compared notes. And it was reading from right across the disciplines. There was obviously science reading in there, but there were humanities, there were arts reading, there was fiction, there was reading from all sorts of places. And his job was to help the company to constantly stay ahead, to constantly understand. And that's one of my jobs in a forum like this. And it may not be anything that I specifically say, but it may be an idea that somebody who's sitting there has whilst I'm talking.
And how would you win? You know about the future, so you must have the recipe.
Well, you were kind enough to say in your introduction that I predict the future, and if you'll forgive me for correcting you, of course the future can't be predicted, but you can get some ideas. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today if the books from the early 80s I wrote weren't much more right than they are wrong. Of course, I got some things wrong. You can't get everything right. But you did get the broad pattern. For example, in 83, 84, it was possible to see that the internet would dominate everything. And in 83, it was possible to see, and as I did, that search was the driving force of the internet. And when I published the book that came out of my work, and that was called the Online Handbook in 1984, it was a worldwide flop, a massive disaster, because it was at least 10 years too early for such ideas. But it allowed me to think in such a way that if I had been in business at that time, and I'd previously been in business very successfully, I would have been able to use that knowledge to shape the business. It's my experience over the last 20 or 30 years that national politicians pay more attention to business leaders than ever before. They sense where the power in their nations lies. And what that means is that if business leaders are saying, yes, of course we want easier tax conditions for that, and of course we want this, if they're also mentioning the difficulties of the world, I think that's helpful.